Hi, everyone. It's your host, Kimberly Schaub from the PeasOnMoss podcast and Chef Neville Craw from Arbys Restaurant Group. And we are here on the Research Chefs Association webinar to share some of the presentation that Chef Neville gave at the 2017 RCA conference and to get to give you a preview of the PeasOnMoss podcast. So welcome, everyone. And welcome, Chef Neville. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to just roll forward with it being the PeasOnMoss podcast, so I'm excited you're on both of the shows.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Cool. Yeah, your presentation at the 2017 conference was just powerful, from the media that you and the team put together to the content that you actually shared. And so it's exciting to get to share your lessons learned even another 6 months later with the RCA world and the research chefs out there.
Well, I had so much fun doing that, and for somebody who doesn't usually enjoy standing in front of a lot of people, it was a blast, and the audience and feedback was amazing. So really excited to be back here today and tackle it again.
Awesome. So, you know, we don't get to do a show of hands for the people who got to see your live presentation. And I have the rare access to your actual slides. But the thing that I remembered and really enjoyed were actually the video that you shared of a meat that was smoking and how you guys took over a television station in Minnesota. Was that right?
That's right.
So what?
Sorry. The idea behind that really was that well, it's a couple of things. That we were making a claim that a truthful claim that the brisket that we were doing was smoked for at least 13 hours, and it really, you know, generally our brisket is smoked between 13 and about 18 hours, and but legally you had to go with the lowest product, and that was 13 hours. So we wanted to convey that in a way that would be fun and engaging, and also you know, tell the story. So the idea really was to create an experience where people got to witness it, and you know, people were like, oh, it's like, you know, watching paint dry. But for me, I totally nerded out, because it was how many people get to see inside of a smoker and to see the actual like product change, the brisket go from the size it is to the final size, and to see the bark created and all of that. And it won us a Guinness Book of World Records, and actually somebody from the Guinness Book had to sit there and watch the whole thing, which is that alone is pretty amazing. And then the Guinness Book was like the longest aired commercial of all time, and they were able to find, with our agency, they were able to find a station in Minnesota that would actually air the whole thing, and then we also did it online. And the average viewership was about 38 minutes per person watching meat being smoked, which we thought was just amazing. So that was super fun, and to cut a hole inside of a smoker, put a glass window, put lights inside. We actually, the lights burned out a couple times, so we had to start this whole process over twice during the whole thing. But to see all of that happen inside of it was so neat for me and for, you know, smoked meat aficionados to be able to nerd out with it as well. It was so cool.
Man, yeah. So So people could tune into that channel or stream watching a video of what a shot of a window in the smoker and just watch it as it's smoked. That's crazy.
Yeah, if you Google Arby's smoked brisket or 13-hour commercial or something like that, you can watch the time lapse version, which is probably a little bit more enjoyable.
So then that's only 38 minutes instead of 13 hours.
Exactly. So
how did you get from, say, where you are as the corporate executive chef at Arbys? Could you tell us a little bit about your pathway that got you to coming up with a team of people, the idea of doing a 13-hour video smoking meat?
Well, my pathway to this wonderful world is like many of us, is sort of you never know where you're going to end up. I went to school for advertising. I wanted to be in advertising, and with a family background in restaurants and food, and a mother who could cook like nobody's business, and taught me making hollandaise without a double boiler at 9 and things like that. And I always had passion around this and this industry, and worked in restaurants in college. But after a bunch of internships and trying to find a pathway in advertising, I didn't really have a niche there. I couldn't write or draw or be organized enough to run a account team, and so there really wasn't a home for me in advertising. But I like that creative environment, and that once I sort of decided to get out of that, I ended up finding my way into culinary school, and had all these different ideas that weren't necessarily tied to restaurants, but I really wanted to kind of get the food background concentrated. And then I left culinary school and did work in restaurants for about 4 or 5 years, and sort of stumbled my way into a job with Grecian Light Foods in Chicago, doing as a traveling training chef, and then R&D after that, and which was such a great learning experience, because they did every possible product you could imagine in every category, from dessert, sauces, proteins, tons of proteins, bread, platters, you name it. And so for a very lean team, it was a indoctrination by fire, and that in a short period of time gave me a lot of experience in a lot of areas that helped springboard me into other jobs that led to Arbys. And here, I've been here 13 years. I'm now the vice president and brand executive chef of Arbys, and but essentially been doing the same role for the 13 years. It just expanded a little bit of my responsibilities. But the thing here, it's when you get to those kind of things, not only are you developing food and you're like, okay, it has to taste good, but you have to be able to tell a story as well. And we talk about it all the time. It can be a great sandwich, but if it's not a simple communication to the guest, you're going to have a hard time conveying to them that they should try it. And without trial, you're not going to have success in sales. And so it all really starts with, inherently, yes, we're going to make the best food we can, but we need to tell a story with that food, and it needs to be simple in communication to get there.
So for Arbys, you guys really do take the tenet that the consumer eats with his or her eyes first, and you have to take that through media to get people to walk into your restaurant. And then once they enter, also to have the restaurant and the products be presented in a way that still makes them, you know, again, first enjoy the dish with their eyes before they get to order it. So how do you link all of that together so that it's one, you know, consistent story from the commercial that I saw to the Arbys that I drove by, you know, to actually pulling in and walking into the restaurant?
Well, we have a super tight-knit relationship with our ad agency, which is Fallon, and they're out of Minneapolis. In fact, I was just meeting with them this week, and we did a brainstorming session, and where we you know, our creative teams and their creative teams got together and really looked at where we wanted to go about talking about the menu, and that connection of, you know, all the food that we want to develop, we want it to be, you know, with craftsmanship and have, you know, culinary roots and really mean something. And so we start there, but, you know, without this connection with those guys, you know, sometimes those stories could get lost along the way, or they could take a different turn. A sandwich could have one name or one direction and then end up being something else. And so there's a lot of dialogue back and forth of, all right, you know, what is the intent? And, you know, are we speaking to the right audience? And I think if you think about that in the context of the food, if you really think of the story you're trying to tell and the problem you're trying to solve, you know, as you're developing the product, it should make the ideas more clear.
So thinking about the story and the goal of the product throughout the product development process.
Yeah, you know, it's like, what are the three things that you really want to get across? You know, it's like, okay, with sandwich development, you know, it's Arbys, so we have the meats, right? And so are we gonna talk about the bread carrier? You know, are we going to talk about the sauce, or are we just going to talk about the idea of the sandwich, and then the sauce would be inherent? You know, and is the protein enough of a story in itself to carry the whole message? So we think about the role of each ingredient, and sometimes, you know, got to make tough choices. You know, you and I were talking before offline here about, you know, making things operationally feasible. Well, if one of the, you know, SKUs that we're talking about bringing in, if it's not really going to help tell the story, do we need to have it? So, you know, there's a lot of that, you know, there's a lot of that, you know, that you have to work through. You know, it's the fun challenge of it, but you know, the story in how the product is shot, how it looks in restaurant, how it's being made, but, you know, is it compelling enough to make them have, you know, make purchase decisions around that?
Yeah, and for the consumers that do go to Arbys often, do you find that there's a lot of repurchase of, say, our tried and true favorites, or was the focus with this We Have the Meats kind of campaign, was it to get your current consumer to try a new sandwich, or was it to bring in a brand new consumer into Arbys in general?
Well, I think the intent is always to bring in a new consumer to expand your reach and audience, and we were successful with that, but we were also successful of getting, is that, you know, a big chunk of our LTO successes is getting the Arbys tried and true customer to come in and try something else the next time, which I think was a little bit of a surprise for me, but it also felt it was a pat on the back for our whole team that our tried and true guest trusted us enough to try pork belly when they normally get a regular roast beef sandwich. I didn't expect that, but I was very happy to hear that.
That's interesting to talk about the trust that the guest has in your brand or in the restaurant experience to get to be exposed to some new foods, because building that trust takes years, but you can lose that trust in minutes, it seems. Say if potentially a bad media experience occurs or something along the lines where the consumer's trust in a brand can be shaken. How, when the team, the R&D team and the marketing teams are starting to think about how to engage a brand new consumer, what was that first step in building new trust with a new consumer who hasn't had, say, years of experience with Arbys, or possibly didn't have the greatest experience years ago?
Well, I'll think. I have one thing that I'm thinking of, and it when we launched, or I guess tested, really, it was only in a select restaurants around the country. When we launched the venison last year, the venison sandwich, the intent was a celebration of hunting season, and the ads before we did venison, it was, there was a brand spot that we did that was equating hunting season to be meat season, and how that fits with Arbys. And to celebrate that, we developed the venison sandwich. And through that, we gathered a new audience, which were this audience of hunters. And the learning from that was that we heard a lot of feedback that that hunters, they're actually a mighty group, and big purchase power. They are passionate. They spend a lot of time in their cars. And they feel misrepresented and not really spoken to a lot from a national media perspective. And we were able to embrace them in a natural way, and they felt it through this connection, and then with the celebration of the venison sandwich. Now, I think we'd all like to say that we all had the foresight to think that this was all going to happen, but a little bit of it is organic, except for the fact that there was the celebration around hunting season. So I think the hope was there, but to be able to actually achieve that and tap into a new audience, it's very rare but very exciting when you do. And I think the story behind that is being authentic, being true to those people that you're talking to, and not, give it lip service. So with this sandwich, because, we're research, chefs and food scientists here, that, I wanted to keep it super simple. I wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to be venison, sausage, that it was not going to be mystery meat that people were going to identify with immediately. So we made it a steak, off of the leg meat, which, if people familiar with venison, it's either backstrap or leg meat. And the leg meat, we could cut it into butterflied fillets that would fit a sandwich bun very well. Backstrap probably wouldn't as well. So this was a way to do it, and we made them very hearty. They're about 5.5 ounces per fillet, and then we grilled them, and then they were sous vide for several hours with just a simple kind of salt, pepper, garlic marinade. So kept it really simple, and then the sauce was a juniper berry sauce, juniper berry steak sauce with Cabernet, to keep it very, to enhance the flavor of the meat, but not mask it. It had some crispy onions, but no cheese, and on a simple roll, and that was it. Because we really just wanted to celebrate the venison, and to me, I was so proud that all of the dots connected, from the product to the advertising to the guest, and then where we had it, these things sold out in some places about 15 minutes.
Oh wow, 15 minutes. That's amazing. And again, you're saying all of those dots connected. What were, in addition to kind of the marketing team and the R&D team, what other dots were involved in this? Because while you say keep it simple, it sounds complicated.
You know what? The sandwich experience is simple. Getting in there was so what we didn't know going into this is that there are not USDA venison facilities in the United States. There's no if there are, they're very small venison farms. So we had to we tracked down the best source of venison in the world, and found red-tailed deer, which in the U.S. people hunt a lot of white-tailed deer, but red-tail is the most farm-raised. So we found red-tailed deer in New Zealand, and beautiful deer farms there. Tons of land for them to run, and the venison is super clean eating, not gamey. And then with we also had to find a partner that was willing to help us procure the venison, but also cook it. And we did that. We worked with Sugar Creek here in the U.S. And they were really just getting their sous vide facility started. So this was trial by fire for all of us. But they cut the venison in New Zealand and then sent it all to Sugar Creek, who then marinated, grilled it, and then sous vide it, and then it went out to our restaurants from there. But it was anything but simple to get it there.
And my brain drifted off to what the food safety planning must have looked like, and how you had to get buy-in from regulatory and your QC and QA teams. I mean, that cross-functional conversation has to have been long and interesting and important to get that type of buy-in. I think I brush past that too quickly sometimes, but to really get all of the team pulling in the same direction happily, and not in the sense of, well, I gave my opinion and we're going this direction, so now I'm going with it, but just to really be bought in and say, this is a challenge that we're taking on, because the goal is to engage a new audience, the hunting community, with a product that many of us grew up eating, and again, with different types of history with venison, and then to bring it into Arbys, where, at least when I was growing up looking at Arbys, it was, quote, another restaurant, and to really get past all of that kind of fog so that you could get everybody on the same team must have been challenging.
It was, and it was, but it really, I found that we have such a great group of people that are pointing in the right direction, and the can-do spirit here at Arbys. One of our core values, company, is get it done. Sometimes that is to our detriment, because we are willing to, everybody is willing to get it done, and sometimes you have to step back and be like, okay, well, at what cost? So there's healthy discussions about that. But I will say this too: wedge a product out of sequence in the middle of a normal yearly calendar promotion for a day, it's the same as doing an LTO for 30 days, but now you're only doing it for days. All the training has to be the same. All of the QA checks have to be the same. The HACCP program, all of that, and it's only going in for a day while they still have all of their normal stuff going on, plus another LTO promotion, limited time offer in the restaurants. All of that happens at the same time. And our restaurants were able to, that participated in this, had to adjust in bringing this in, and then positively dealing with, you know, hundreds of people coming in their restaurant, you know, on a time when it normally wouldn't be that busy. So that was and I think, you know, all of us, no one knew what to expect until we had it, and then learning from that was fantastic. But the experience was phenomenal, and we had a restaurant in Nashville that they painted with camouflage the entire outside of the restaurant. And I was not there, but I saw pictures, and the line was down the building and around the block. So it was pretty fantastic.
That's amazing. I mean, and that shows utter commitment, especially like you're saying. I really appreciate that you said an LTO takes as much work as a product launch within a product calendar, because I think coming from the restaurant world, if chef wants to throw something on the menu that night, you might scramble up your station for the night, but you survive. To do that in select restaurants nationwide for such a large restaurant group must have been exciting, for a nice euphemism.
It really was. You know, the neat thing that we found, the super positive byproduct of this was the fact that the buzz around those restaurants, even after the venison had left, was incredible. We saw and this was a really true new guest experience. People traveled far and wide to find restaurants that had it, and so we saw the restaurants that had the venison. They were busier than normal for days and weeks after the venison had left.
Wow. Yeah. So I am curious about some of the lessons learned from this particular campaign. And if listeners are interested, you can go into the chat and type in some of your questions, and then at the end we'll get a chance to field some of those. But in the meanwhile, would you share some of the lessons learned from this campaign, or from this kind of revolution rebuilding your brand in general?
Yeah, you know, a few years into all this now, I think the first thing that we touched upon it a little bit, you know, the can-do spirit and you know, this everybody going, you know, we can make this happen, we can do it. Well, you know, I would say the at what cost is to understanding your operation model, and there is a the word breaking point is not the right word, but there is a kind of line, you know, that at some point you can tax your restaurant teams or the operations model to, you know, a detriment on speed of service, or even, you know, on quality development of the, you know, or making of the food, if there's too much or it's too complex or cumbersome. And so, you know, the lessons learned is, you know, everybody says, of course, we're going to keep that in mind, and we do. But from our team, from the product development team, the culinary team, is to really, really understand what we're asking, and then when we're going to ask it, what does that environment look like? What is happening in the restaurants at the time that sandwich or any of our limited time offers, any of our LTOs, what's happening at that time, so we can sort of forecast what it's going to look like from an operations standpoint to give them the best chance of success. And back to what I mentioned earlier, if there's a ingredient, or something that's happening that isn't being told as part of the story, that that is a nice to have but not a must have, without obviously hurting quality and guest experience, do we need to have it? So we're challenging ourselves now more than ever to really think through all of those things.
And when you're talking about those ingredients, you were talking about the bun, some of the other components in a sandwich. There is probably nothing worse than the meat being upstaged by the condiments. How do you address that without losing the spirit of the dish? Say, if I'm kind of shooting in the dark here, but if you're going with a sauce that takes its roots from a specific cuisine, as in if you drop the sauce, you lose the target of the cuisine. How do you then balance so that protein stays in front, but the condiment or the flavor follows right behind and harmonizes with it?
Well, a fantastic question. I think a lot of people, my inspirational sandwich, and maybe one day we'll get it on the Arbys limited time offer, but my inspirational sandwich for everything is a banh mi. And you think about banh mi, you've got these two cultures clashing, with France and Vietnam at the time, and the only great byproduct of that experience was some of the food. But where those two things came together, was this great crusty bread and butter and the French baguette and all that experience, and then then pate, and then the fresh ingredients and the pickles and the great kind of highs and lows that you get with the flavors of the banh mi, and those two things come together. So you get these like peaks and valleys of flavor with sweetness and savoriness and acidity and all the things that what I call makes you want to like eat more, or repeatability, and ultimately this word that makes people cringe, crave, but that kind of highs and lows and yin and yang of flavors makes you want to take another bite, makes you crave it, makes you want to come back and eat it again. And I look at every sandwich with that kind of lens. Does it make me want to keep eating it? And we will fight for, I tell my team, the team here all the time, like, hey, we're the champions of the food. You have to champion the food, and so where the rubber meets the road is if something is in that has to tell that flavor story. We will make a decision. We will not make a decision to take that out if it's a necessary ingredient to tell that story, to give dimensions to the food, to have the highs and lows. And no one at Arbys would ask us to do that. Then it just becomes a conversation of maybe when we do it, or is there something else that isn't necessary with part of the promotion.
Then that obviously then requires conversation with a lot of your partner businesses. And you gave a couple of shout outs earlier. I'm wondering, does it come to building those relationships with your supply chain over time, where they also trust you with your innovation to say, yes, we understand what you're doing. Here are some ideas for the next big thing or the next way to keep your brand on top?
Absolutely. I mean, there is no us without them. There's no success without vendor partners that are willing to. You can't crack a code or push into new arenas without vendor partners who are willing to take that journey and especially take risk. There's capital risk when they're changing equipment around. No company out there is waiting with open line time saying, "Oh, we're ready to do a porchetta for you, Arbys. Just give us the PO." It really takes some exciting dialogue and this mutual can-do experience, and then also, hey, there's going to be give and take. There's going to be some tough times along the way on the product, and it's my job internally at Arbys to set Arbys up to know what's happening, that as we're exploring something new, what are the pitfalls that may occur. But as research development people, I don't know, the part that gets me super excited every day is the experience of starting with an idea and then ending with something. And our jobs, more than being food people and creative and developing and making it work from that side, it's really like, can we put out enough fires along the way to make this thing live?
Yeah.
And problem solving is 100% part of it, and then finding those partners out there that are willing to take that journey with you. And the thing that we try to do, I believe this, is that we will not engage in kind of the back and forth sample, like, we don't, someone says, what are you working on? Well, I don't know. What do you have? And then they send something and then it goes in the freezer and turns into a black hole. And then you never try it. And then somebody's frustrated because they sent you a sample. We try not to engage in that path. We try to engage in the fact that if somebody is submitting something to us, we've asked for, there's a purpose, and then that product is we are going to work very hard to get it in front of the guest or die trying, and the guest will decide whether or not we're moving that forward. So that,
explain that.
Well, just because years of doing this, it's there's a lot of people spend a lot of time trying to get things in front of you or want to sell you what they're working on, and I understand that completely. But it may not be what you're working on. So then there's this push-pull of, we have our pathway, and then they have their pathway. So when we engage people, we want to do it in earnest. We want to engage them that, hey, we're asking for X, Y, and Z, and working with them to figure what that is out. But that the intent is that we're going to take it to a taste panel and let the guest decide if it moves past that into the next phase of testing. In that way, all of our work is being purposeful and not, and that their work is being purposeful, that if they're submitting samples, it's not to sit in the black hole of the freezer, but to actually move towards a guest test.
Oh man, that is so key, especially, a couple of us have come out of a recent ingredient supply conference, and so the tendency is to go sending out, or in my case, being on the receiving end of what feels like hundreds of little samples. And I really like that you review those sample opportunities with, can I use this now? Can I get this in front of a guest? Or maybe now isn't the right time, and let's stay in touch and see when we can actively engage. That's incredible. And And like you said, then it doesn't waste the time of the vendor R&D team. It doesn't waste space in your freezer. And then you have an active conversation of, hey, I know we met at this last show. What are you working on now? And how can this vendor provide something that helps you with your active projects?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that really all happened organically, just because, you know, you feel frustration from people when they have sent you something and you haven't looked at it, and but you have no need for it, and so there's that, you know, like, I'm sorry, but I'm not that sorry, but I, you know, but I want to help you, but I also have to help myself, and so there's, like, you know, it's there's this back and forth, and then it's like, you know what, you know, how do I want to be engaged? And the thing is, it does force people to look at your business with a little bit more of a, hey, if I'm going to, you know, be involved with them, what are they trying to do? You know, versus what am I trying to do? You know, we have a new product. I want Arbys to sell it. Well, if it doesn't fit with Arbys and I don't know if it fits, then it's going to be a hard sell, right? So, you know, it's more about somebody looking at our business and saying, you know, how do we create something that works for their business? And then doing your research and figuring that out. And then, so if someone does engage and said, you know, we've thought of this for you, it becomes a lot quicker. Like, well, that makes sense. You know, let's take a look at it. All of a sudden you have a new open dialogue, and people are working on our side and their side specifically for something for us to bring into an LTO format. So I just find it, if it's more purposeful versus, you know, kind of throwing things out there to see if they'll stick, the success rate is higher.
Yeah. No, I love that you said that. I had just landed on that idea as well, to say to a salesperson who reaches out to say, how can I use this in the product line that you can readily see? You know, go onto our website, go into our stores and see what we're selling, and how can your product fit in there? And that's a really great way to get that conversation going.
Absolutely. And I can't stress enough the vendor partner relationships, the conversations, and you know, the dialogue. You know, I have, with people, I've come up with, you know, or we collectively have come up with the best ideas, you know, breaking bread or having, you know, a drink together, and you know, having that dialogue of, you know, well, what about this? Well, can you do it this way? And this back and forth, and just having like a true, you know, just no holds barred, like, you know, over a few drinks ideation session of sort of twisting and conjuring what they're doing today and what your intent is and all of that, and bringing it, you know, to something that is at least testable. And but again, you know, inherently the two sides have to come together and know that exactly what you want, you may not get exactly that, but you could get close. And exactly what they're doing today, they may have to augment that a little bit to find that middle ground.
Yeah. Wow, that is so powerful. And you're right that conversation, whether that is with your marketing team, with the owners or the franchisees of each of the restaurants, you know, the cross-functional team within the kind of corporate headquarters, all of that. And it sounds like these conversations are daily, continuous, ever-changing. Is that kind of the big lesson overall for, you know, what has helped you and your team kind of build up the brand of Arbys and engage in this new kind of generation of the company?
Yeah, you know, it's a great question. I think, you know, we mentioned it earlier. trust is huge. Building trust within our organization as a product development team, as a culinary team, that what we attempt to do, that we will succeed more than we fail on what we attempt to do, that we will succeed more than we fail at bringing it at the cost structure that we need. Luckily for us, we work backwards with costing more than forwards. We start with the product and then figure out if we can sell it versus starting with the cost and then figuring out what product fits that model. But not everybody has that luxury. So the trust that and you're only as good as your last sandwich or the last thing you said, a lot of times in our industry, we're all regurgitating something that somebody else told us, and you're only as good as that information is. And so if you tell somebody something and it's exciting news, but it's not verified or factual yet, but it's promising, you have to qualify those things, because people interpret the information and you may turn a positive into a negative if you're not careful with how you convey the information. And so, building trust, making people aware of what's coming, letting them know, pitfalls that could happen along the way, so that, there are always going to be surprises and there are always going to be, challenges. Can you let your stakeholders all the way through the boards and franchisees and that, or, any company, your stakeholders and leadership team, can you make them aware of, of the things that they might need to know ahead of time? And I don't mean, telling everybody all the problems that are there. It's more like, to get from here to there, here are the things that we may encounter along the way, and each time is different, but experience can really teach you, some of the things along the way to kind of get people on board with that and knowing that, because less surprises means, happier people. So it's a challenge, but that I kind of look at projects that way, like, what do I need to know to kind of keep this thing going?
Wow, thank you so much, Chef, for really sharing your experiences and lessons learned. I think every statement you made probably had a scar behind it. And I really want to thank you for that. We don't get to hear all of the battle stories. We just get to see the success either through the commercials or the buzz that's on social media about it. And so it's fun to get a peek behind the curtain. So thank you.
Well, Kimberly, thank you so much. This was so much fun. I look forward to hopefully doing this in a few more years with new stories.
Yeah. Well, we do have a couple minutes left, and we did get a couple of questions in our chat box. I'd like to hog a little bit more of your time, if you don't mind.
No problem.
The first question, and I think you started to answer this just now, the question is, a lot of these ideas are really disruptive, but risk involved. How do you work with the franchisees to get their buy-in?
Great question. Do we know who asked this?
I don't.
Well, whoever asked that, great question. I guess the buy-in, we try to mitigate the risk as much as possible. So, but still mitigate the risk to the franchisees while still taking one. So when we launched pork belly for the first time, we gave ourselves permission to run out, which you wouldn't normally do. You don't want to run out during a limited time offer with commercials going on. There's a lot of cost. There's a lot of other things. You've got potential unhappy guests if they show up. So you don't typically want to do that, but we gave ourselves enough room to get through sort of the media phase, and then we were okay to run out, which normally our run through would happen post media and there'd be a sellout period. This way we didn't buy so much that if people didn't show up and try it, that there was going to be a lot of obsolete inventory left. Finding the avenues to mitigate risk and then being very upfront with the community at large, of what those risks are. But our franchisee community has been so supportive of taking the right risks and challenges and willing to push the envelope in a lot of those arenas.
Nice. Yeah, and then kind of helping them absorb that risk and understand it. Makes sense. Question on another topic: how do your taste panels work, and is it an iterative process?
The iterative part. Sometimes we will do iterative if we're trying to crack a certain question. We will do iterative, and I love those because with the iterative process, you can start out with one assumption and end up somewhere else, and that somewhere else is usually better. You have to really kind of know what to look for in those, because every group that you talk to is going to kind of have a different slant, and the people in those groups can influence each other. So you kind of have to pick out the little nuggets of information to kind of guide you. So I do love those. A lot of times we will develop our best guess and then put it through taste panels, which are made up of a group of 100 to 200 guests, and from heavy to light users, and they rate the food over on purchase intent at the price point that we are planning on selling it, within the format that we're planning on selling it. So and sometimes if it's a new product, we will that brand new to us and we're trying to understand, we may put it in different taste panels to get different readings on different ways of doing it. So we could use that iteratively as well. But usually we get it to the place where we think it's the best we can do, and then get readings on that. And if there is something that comes out of that needs fine tuning, then we will go back and do that.
And my personal question to that then is, do you have a product launch timeline set up such that you could go back to the bench after taste panels?
I wish.
Yeah, loaded question.
Sometimes we bake that in, and sometimes and we use taste panels and we use everything. And then I think, different companies look at these differently. Something that the letter of the law, that once it goes through a taste panel, you can't make changes. We look at everything that we do as, that they're points of influence, or they are I'm blanking on the word, but really, kind of versus stamp and saying nothing can change after this. Taste panel to us is a one influencer, and collectively all the different influencers intuition, time of year, all the influences, or the feedback from the board and the franchisees. All of those are influencers, and so the taste panel is one of those too. But we don't necessarily say 100% once it gets through taste panel we can't make changes. And once we do, depending on the degree, then we decide if it needs to go back through or if it's changing the softness of the bread. We kind of determine what level that is before we may make a tweak and then not put it through again, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Third and final question for you.
Okay.
Compared to traditional brand building tools, how does video compare? And do you consider it a risk for marketing? And that question was from Michael at Woodland Foods. Thank you, Michael.
Okay, so video, I'm guessing I'm trying to understand the intent. Can you read it to me one more time?
Sure. Compared to traditional brand building tools, how does video compare?
And you consider it a risk for?
The video that was used to show the brisket smoking. Apparently.
Oh, okay. So the video of well, I think it's a great brand building tool. I think the avenue of social media to tell brand building stories that you don't have to go out and do a commercial with. That you can do it in different forums, and you know what? They can be specifically targeted to that new audience that you're really trying to get. I think they're incredibly impactful. It's funny. We do videos. It's not. I guess in a way it is brand building, but we'll do videos to our team members that I'll do right before we launch a new product to kind of tell them the 3 things they really should know about that product right before they start talking to guests about it. And we find all that to be super impactful and not risky at all, really, with these, because you're really, you're getting another avenue to tell the story that you want to tell.
Yeah. And in our younger generation, was raised with video and interaction being a key way to communicate. I think everything from restaurants to educators are learning that video is a good way to engage. I personally have chosen a podcast. Sorry. But in both ways, to get to interact together through voice is very different from interacting through writing. And I think it does, like you're saying, it helps you build trust because you're hearing someone speak clearly and honestly and somewhat off the cuff. And it helps us get to know you better that way.
Absolutely. Great question, Michael from Woodland Foods.
Well, that concludes the questions that have been posted. You can always reach out to us through the RCA and on my website, PeasOnMoss.com, and I'll forward questions along as well. But thank you again, Chef Neville, for spending the hour with us, and to the RCA for giving us this wonderful opportunity and platform to share our businesses and perspectives. Really appreciate your guys' time.
Kimberly, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody out there. And if you have any additional questions for me, you can email me at ncraw@arbys.com.
Oh, get ready for emails.
That's great.
Well, thanks again. And you're dashing off to a major conference, so have fun and do great things. We'll see you in March in Savannah.
Can't wait. See you all there, and appreciate the time today.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.